You only get one chance to make a first impression, and that's never been more true than in the gaming industry. A poor fan reception can absolutely tank a game's chances of being a hit, being hit with backlash and controversy that sees even the most bankable IP crash and burn if it pisses off its audience. However, the cool thing about games in the modern era is that, with titles being constantly changed via expansion packs, patches, and updates, developers and publishers can turn the ship around and amend the issues that fans initially hated. So with that in mind, I'm Josh from WhatCulture.com, and these are 8 hated video games you should play in 2022. Number 8, Ninokooney 2 Revenant Kingdom. With the success of Ninokooney Wrath of the White Witch, fans couldn't be more excited when Level 5 announced a sequel. But as soon as gamers got their hands on Ninokooney 2 Revenant Kingdom, they noticed a major issue. It was way too easy. Providing no challenge, fans zipped through the campaign with little effort. And even though it is satisfying to vanquish enemies in most RPGs, it's not gratifying when the battles feel like child's play. Fortunately, Level 5 heard these complaints loud and clear and thus added 2 new difficulty settings several months later. The developers could have left it at that, but they continued to bend over backwards to make amends by adding not 1, not 2, but 3 DLC packs. When Revenant Kingdom became available on the Nintendo Switch in 2021 as well, it included all previous downloadable content from the get-go. Sure, Ninokooney 2 still has its problems, such as those tedious recruitment missions, but fans of the first game should give it a chance. It's not as good as its predecessor, but the latest editions of Revenant Kingdom have transformed a mediocre sequel into a solid follow-up. Number 7, Battlefield 5. DICE, in its current form, is better at saving games than they are at shipping great ones. While the studio was once revered in the first-person shooter space, since Battlefield 4, they've made a habit of releasing garbage fires that land on consoles and PC red hot, and then spend the next few years putting out the fires and transforming a rough-around-the-edges release into a fan favorite. Battlefield 4, Star Wars Battlefront 2, there are a bunch of rags to riches stories that could have been included here, but they've been celebrated enough. DICE, however, doesn't get enough credit for turning around Battlefield 5. And the thing is, Battlefield 5 actually had relatively few launch problems compared to the other games in the franchise. However, the World War II shooter was criticised for moving away from what the series was, and was lambasted for focusing on quote-unquote unrealistic cosmetics and additions to what some fans thought was a gritty shooter through and through. That, on top of controversial changes to the time to kill in game modes, just made people swear it off. Which sucks, because Battlefield 5 was always good, and it has only gotten better with age. The gunplay has never been better, with new movement systems making the fighting more tactile and immersive. The maps too are memorable, with expansion packs bolstering an already impressive lineup of content. Knee-jerk patches at launch did initially do more harm than good, but Battlefield 5 eventually got there. Number 6, Mario Tennis Aces. Since Super Mario Kart, Nintendo have devised dozens of sport-themed spin-offs centered around their mustachioed mascot. None of these games have been as successful as Mario Kart, of course, but Mario Tennis did come pretty close. Due to this N64 title's precise controls, catchy music, and excellent multiplayer, it received universal praise. Unfortunately though, none of the sequels maintained the same standard. Mario Power Tennis was mediocre, Ultra Smash was dire, and if you were hoping the Switch title, Mario Tennis Aces, would turn the tide, well, you were left disappointed. Despite becoming one of the most successful games on the system, the latest entry was lacking in playable characters, tournament modes, and multiplayer options. However, the most important word in that criticism is was. Mario Tennis Aces has received a dozen patches since, which have made over 100 improvements. These additions include 14 additional characters, dozens of bonus costumes, new modes, co-op challenges, revised character abilities, and the option to skip previously unskippable sequences. Thanks to all these extra features, Mario Tennis Aces is shaping up to be the best game in the series since the original. Number 5, Marvel's The Avengers. If you ask a superhero fan who the Avengers' greatest enemy is, you're likely to get a couple of answers. You know, Ultron, Loki, Galactus, Thanos. But if you're a gamer, there is only one answer, and that is Square Enix. Even though Marvel's Avengers looked like it was in safe hands since it was developed by the same company behind Final Fantasy, the game was rife with glitches as soon as it launched. But with the benefit of hindsight, did Marvel's Avengers truly deserve so much hate? Hell yeah it did, it was so bad. The action role-playing brawler wasn't just sloppy or imprecise, it was totally chaotic. Characters would fall through the ground and get stuck in looping animations so often that the game was borderline unplayable in its original state, and on top of that, the missions themselves were kinda bland and the grind was aggressive. Thankfully though, Marvel's Avengers received multiple patches which fixed, without a shed of exaggeration by the way, over 1,000 bugs. Although this fact proves this Square Enix title just wasn't ready for its initial launch, it doesn't change the fact that most of the title's most blatant problems have been resolved. The platform specifics were fixed, matchmaking was fine-tuned, and the XP boost, which required real money, was deservingly discarded. Marvel's Avengers is still not perfect by any means, but it's light years ahead of what it once was, and the added superheroes you can play as are a total treat. Is it as good as it should be? No, but at least it's fun now. Number 4, Pokemon Sword and Shield. As was expected from the latest mainline entries in Nintendo's most lucrative franchise, Pokemon Sword and Shield incorporated critters from previous generations. Though fans were extremely disappointed that this new title didn't bring back lovable characters like Weedle or Geodude. Developers at Game Freak defended their decision to not incorporate every pre-existing Pokemon since it would have been too time-consuming to recreate each creature from the ground up. But when data miners discovered some models were used from Pokemon games on the 3DS, well, this added to the backlash. Despite the fact that Sword and Shield had a lot of great features, including Dynamaxing, players were claiming that this was the worst Pokemon game without really bothering to play it, just because it didn't feature all the Pokemon. Fortunately, Game Freak though amended this issue 1 year later with multiple expansion packs that included new areas and 200 extra Pokemon, bringing the grand total to 400. Sadly, some players still thought the Pokédex was incomplete, despite the fact that the RPG has more Pokemon than any other game, but because of the abundance of content and creative new mechanics, Sword and Shield is definitely worth playing regardless of the initial backlash. Number 3, No Man's Sky. The disappointment that No Man's Sky created is the stuff of legends. We were promised a literal universe filled with 18 quintillion planets, and instead we got an incomplete title where the player mines rocks and, well, that's pretty much it. The one thing that No Man's Sky perfectly captured is how outer space, although fascinating and wondrous, is also mind-bogglingly empty and just kind of boring. Hello Games knew their project's launch was a failure though, and so got to work to redeem themselves. 3 years after No Man's Sky debuted, the Foundation update was released, which added base building customizations, more rounded purchase options, and a survival mode. The Beyond patch, which massively expanded the multiplayer, was also highly praised, and it became the default version of the game at no additional cost. Originally, No Man's Sky was receiving Metacritic scores ranging from 61% to around 70%, but thanks to the Beyond update, that score was boosted to a more satisfying 83. And with Hello Games founder Sean Murray talking about the possibility of No Man's Sky being remastered in the future, it looks like things are only going to get better for the once disgraced title. Number 2, Grand Theft Auto Online. How do you make Grand Theft Auto even more popular? Well, by playing it with your friends online, of course. As a concept, 2013's GTA Online sounded like a winner, but there was no denying that Rockstar North jumped the gun since this title suffered an alarming amount of technical issues from day one. Hell, considering that GTA Online was even nominated for the year's biggest disappointment by some outlets, it looked like the title could never recover. But if you haven't played it in a couple of years, you should give it another go, since issues revolving around cloud server availability, losing saves, and inconsistent frame rates have been ironed out. Bizarrely, one of GTA Online's biggest improvements was not even made by the developers, but by one of its users. In 2021, a player called Toast created their own patch of the game, which reduced the loading times by a staggering 70%. Rockstar was so impressed that they added this feature into an official patch and awarded the player $10,000. It may have taken nearly 10 years for GTA Online to become what it should have been at launch, but it was well worth the wait. Number 1, Cyberpunk 2077. It's customary for gaming developers to oversell their products to generate hype. You know, Daikatana, Fallout 76, and Anthem were all labeled as the next big thing, and yet, where are they now? but nobody oversold their game quite like how CD Projekt Red pitched Cyberpunk 2077. For nearly a decade, we were promised that this action role-playing game would be revolutionary, but the finished product was such a technical mess that the developers were sued for nearly $2 million for downplaying its technical issues. Because CD Projekt Red's stock plummeted by nearly 10% following its release, it looked like the company might be done for. But as No Man's Sky proved, a game can recover from a disastrous launch. However, Cyberpunk 2077's recovery was more impressive since it fixed hundreds of issues in just 1 year. Originally, it was receiving Metacritic scores of around 57 to 61%, but the recent versions of the PC and next-gen versions have earned around 87%, proving that players shouldn't be prepared to turn the game off for good just yet. And considering how much Cyberpunk 2077 has improved in such a short time, you can only imagine how good it's going to be as further tweaks and revisions are incorporated in the future. Whether players should forgive the company though after buying in day one and being burned, well, that's not for me to say really. So that's our list. I want to know what you guys think down in the comments below. What do you think about these games in 2022? And are there any others that you think deserve a reappraisal? Let us know, and while you're down there, could you also give us a like, share, subscribe, and head over to WhatCulture.com for more lists and news like this every single day. Even if you don't know, I've been Josh. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you soon.